The abandoned water trough sat in the shadow of Silverleaf Ranch, a forgotten relic of better days. Eliza Morgan lay curled inside it, her thin cotton dress soaked through with evening dew, one protective arm around a whimpering child no more than 4 years old. Beside them, impossibly, a white duck nestled against the boy's trembling shoulder, its feathers puffing with each breath of the cool autumn air. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Thunder rumbled across the endless Texas sky as Eliza stirred, her copper hair matted against her pale face. The moonlight painted everything in shades of silver and shadow, giving the scene an otherworldly quality. Behind her, the distant silhouette of a town lay dark and unwelcoming, its windows like accusing eyes. "Hush now, Jamie," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse as the boy's soft cries threatened to grow louder. "We're safe for the moment." The duck quacked softly in agreement, as if understanding the need for quiet. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made Eliza's heart stutter. She curled tighter around the child, making herself as small as possible in the weathered trough. Too exhausted to run, too broken to fight, she closed her eyes and prayed for invisibility. The rider approached slowly, the creak of leather and jingle of spurs growing louder with each passing second. The horse snorted, pawing at the ground just feet from their hiding place. Eliza held her breath, counting heartbeats, waiting for the stranger to move on. Then a soft whimper escaped Jamie's lips, followed by the duck's betraying quack. "Well now," came a deep voice, gentle but surprised. "What have we here?" Moonlight silhouetted the tall figure as he dismounted, boots crunching on the gravel. Eliza could make out broad shoulders and the distinct shape of a cowboy hat, but his face remained in shadow. "Please," she managed, her voice barely audible over the quickening rhythm of the rain. "We'll be gone by morning. We're just resting." The stranger knelt beside the trough, and Eliza finally caught a glimpse of his face. Kind eyes the color of faded denim, set in a sun-weathered face that spoke of hard work and open skies. A face that looked nothing like Judge Warren's son, the man she'd been running from for 3 days now. "Ma'am," he said softly, removing his hat. "No one should be sleeping in a horse trough with a child and a—" He paused, eyebrows lifting slightly. "Duck. Especially not with that storm rolling in." Lightning fractured the sky, illuminating the ranch house that stood 100 yards away. The duck shook its feathers indignantly at the thunder that followed. "I'm Nash Sutherland," the cowboy offered, keeping a respectful distance. "This is my family's ranch." Eliza gathered Jamie closer, fighting the urge to bolt. The boy sniffled against her shoulder, his small body radiating fever heat that worried her more than any approaching storm. "He's sick," Nash observed, his voice tightening with concern. "How long has he had that fever?" "Since yesterday," Eliza admitted reluctantly. "I've been giving him willow bark tea, but it's not helping much." Nash extended a hand, then pulled it back when he saw her flinch. "My mother's in the house. She was a nurse during the war. She could help." Eliza hesitated, years of hard-learned caution warring with her desperate need for the boy's sake. Jamie whimpered again, his small face flushed and sweat-dampened despite the cool night. "Why would you help us?" she asked, suspicion edging her voice. "You don't know us." Nash's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "True enough. But I know what it looks like when someone's running scared." He glanced at the dusty road that stretched behind them. "And I know Sheriff Harlan Warren's boy has been combing these parts looking for a woman, a child, and a duck." Eliza's breath caught. "Are you turning us in?" Nash studied her for a long moment, then looked at the sleeping child and the oddly protective waterfowl. "That depends," he said finally, his voice impossibly gentle. "Stay, if they dreamed of me." Confusion flickered across Eliza's exhausted face. "I don't understand." "The boy," Nash clarified, "and the duck, I suppose. Last night, did they dream of a safe place? Of someone who'd help you? His eyes, serious now, held hers. Because my ma always said that dreams are messages. That sometimes, when we're in trouble, our dreams show us where to find safety. Jamie stirred against Eliza's shoulder, his fever-bright eyes opening to fix on Nash with unexpected clarity. "The man with the star on his horse," the boy mumbled. "I dreamed him." Nash's eyebrows rose. "My gelding there has a white star on his forehead." "Told you," Jamie whispered to Eliza before his eyes fluttered closed again. Something shifted in Eliza's chest. Not trust, not yet, but a fragile recognition that perhaps this stranger wasn't a threat. The duck, apparently arriving at the same conclusion, hopped from the trough and waddled toward Nash's boots, quacking imperiously. Nash laughed, a warm sound that seemed to push back the darkness. "Looks like your feathered friend has made up his mind." He extended his hand again, and this time Eliza took it, allowing him to help her climb from the trough with Jamie cradled against her. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "It's Eliza," she said, her voice barely audible over the intensifying rain. "Eliza Morgan. The boy is Jamie. He's not mine by birth, but he's mine now." Her chin lifted slightly, a gesture of defiance. "And the duck is Chester." Nash nodded, as if finding a woman, a feverish boy, and a duck in a water trough was the most natural thing in the world. "Mrs. Morgan." "Miss," she corrected automatically, then bit her lip, regretting sharing even that small detail. "Miss Morgan," Nash amended. "That storm's about to break properly. Let's get all of you inside. You can tell me your story, or not, once the boy's being tended to." As if punctuating his words, the skies opened, rain falling in heavy sheets. Nash shrugged out of his duster and wrapped it around Eliza and Jamie before guiding them toward the warm lights of the ranch house. Chester the duck waddled determinedly behind them, occasionally pausing to shake the rain from his feathers with obvious disapproval. Eliza hesitated at the porch steps, years of hard experience making her scan for escape routes, for dangers. For the first time, she noticed the small badge pinned to Nash's shirt beneath his now removed jacket. "You're a lawman," she breathed, taking a step back. Nash touched the deputy's badge with calloused fingers. "Just a county deputy. Part-time." His eyes held hers steadily. "But right now, I'm just a man offering shelter to those who need it." Before Eliza could respond, the door swung open, revealing an older woman with Nash's same blue eyes and a face lined by years of Texas sun and worry. She took in the bedraggled group on her porch with a single, comprehensive glance. "Nash Sutherland, don't you keep these poor souls standing in the rain?" she scolded, stepping back to usher them inside. Her gaze lingered on Jamie's flushed face. "That child needs tending." "Ma, this is Miss Morgan, Jamie, and Chester," Nash explained, guiding Eliza over the threshold. The house smelled of cinnamon and wood smoke, of polished furniture and decades of family meals. It was everything Eliza had been denied for so long that tears sprang unbidden to her eyes. "The boy has fever," Nash's mother said, already reaching for Jamie. To Eliza's surprise, she found herself surrendering the child without protest. "Nash, fetch my medicine box. Miss Morgan, come sit by the fire before you catch your death." As Nash's mother carried Jamie toward a back bedroom, Chester the duck followed with surprising dignity, leaving wet footprints across the polished floor. "Your duck seems mighty attached to the boy," Nash observed, hanging his dripping hat on a peg by the door. "He's protected him," Eliza said softly. "Better than I could sometimes." Nash poured her a cup of something warm and fragrant that turned out to be apple cider spiced with cinnamon. Most unusual guard dog I've ever seen. Despite everything, Eliza felt a smile tug at her lips. "Chester found us about a year ago. Jamie was just 3 then. The duck simply appeared one day and refused to leave." She sipped the cider, warmth spreading through her chilled body. Jamie needed something to love, something that was his alone. Nash sat across from her, respectful distance between them. "And what about you, Miss Morgan? What do you need?" The simple question, asked without judgment or expectation, nearly undid her. Eliza stared into the dancing flames of the hearth, wondering when anyone had last asked what she needed. "Safety," she whispered finally. "Just somewhere safe?" Nash nodded, as if her answer made perfect sense. "Well, you found that much at least. Silverleaf Ranch has been a haven for 3 generations of Sutherlands." He studied her with those clear blue eyes. "Now, I won't press you for your story tonight. But Sheriff Warren's boy Emmett has been raising hell across 3 counties looking for you. And if I'm harboring you here, I should know what I'm getting into." Eliza's hands tightened around the warm mug. "Emmett Warren," she said, the name like ashes on her tongue. "I was housekeeper at the Warren estate for 2 years. Jamie was their ward, the son of Mrs. Warren's cousin who died in childbirth." Nash waited patiently as she gathered her thoughts, offering no interruption. Judge Warren was kind enough, in his way. Distant, but not cruel. Mrs. Warren tolerated Jamie, though she had little use for a child in her fine house. But Emmett, Eliza's voice hardened. "Emmett Warren believes the world exists to provide for his pleasures and convenience." "I've had dealings with the man," Nash said, his expression darkening. "He's not well loved in these parts. 3 nights ago, I found him in Jamie's room." Eliza's voice dropped to a whisper. "The boy was crying. There were bruises on his arms. Emmett said he was teaching the child discipline, that the boy had damaged one of his prize books." Her eyes, when they met Nash's, burned with a fierce protective rage. "Jamie is 4 years old. He can barely hold a spoon properly, let alone deliberately damage anything." Nash's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, allowing her to continue. "I confronted him, told him I'd speak to the judge." Eliza laughed bitterly. "Emmett reminded me that his father would never believe a housekeeper over his own son, that I was replaceable, that Jamie was theirs to raise as they saw fit." She took a shuddering breath. "That night, after the household was asleep, I packed what I could carry. Jamie was still awake, too frightened to sleep. Chester was on his bed, as always. We left through the kitchen door. With nothing but the clothes on your backs," Nash concluded softly. Eliza nodded. "I had some savings. Not much. We've been moving from town to town, but Emmett's been close behind us all the way. I think." Her voice faltered. "I think he's afraid of what Jamie might say to others, of what I might say." "And the judge?" Nash asked. "Could he not intervene?" "Judge Warren believes in his son's inherent goodness, above all evidence to the contrary," Eliza said flatly. "And he's a powerful man in these parts." Before Nash could respond, his mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "The boy's fever is breaking," she announced. "I've given him willow bark and honey, and a cool compress for his head." Her kind eyes settled on Eliza. "That duck of yours refused to leave his side. Strangest thing I've ever seen, but the child seems comforted by it." Relief washed over Eliza like a physical wave. "Thank you, Mrs. Sutherland." "Martha, please." The older woman smiled warmly. "Now you look dead on your feet, child. I've drawn a bath and laid out some clean clothes. They'll be big on you. They're from when my daughter Rebecca visited last spring, but they'll do until we can wash your things." The kindness of these strangers, this deputy and his mother, was almost more than Eliza could bear. She had expected pursuit, had expected judgment and suspicion. She had not expected this simple human decency. "Why are you helping us?" she asked again, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Martha Sutherland's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Because you needed help," she said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Now come along. You'll feel more yourself after a hot bath and some rest." As Eliza followed Martha down the hallway, she glanced back to find Nash watching her, his expression thoughtful. There was something in his gaze, not pity, but a kind of understanding that suggested he knew what it meant to run from something, to protect someone smaller and more vulnerable than yourself. For the first time in 3 long days, Eliza allowed herself to hope that perhaps they had found more than just temporary shelter. The water in the copper tub was gloriously hot, scented lightly with lavender. Eliza sank into it gratefully, feeling layers of dust and fear begin to dissolve. Martha had left her with thick towels, a nightgown, and a robe, all worn but immaculately clean. Through the bathroom's small window, Eliza could see the storm had intensified, rain lashing against the glass in sheets. Lightning periodically illuminated the yard, thunder following close behind. In such weather no one would be searching, not even someone as determined as Emmett Warren. They had tonight at least. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. After bathing, Eliza crept to the bedroom where Jamie slept. The boy's face was peaceful now, the feverish flush receding. Chester was curled beside him on the quilt, one wing protectively extended over the child's arm. The duck opened one eye as Eliza approached, seemed to recognize her, then settled back to sleep. "He's gonna be fine," Martha said quietly from the doorway. "Children are remarkably resilient." "Yes," Eliza agreed, smoothing Jamie's dark hair back from his forehead. "More than they should have to be." Martha studied her with knowing eyes. "Nash told me a bit of your situation. Judge Warren's boy has quite the reputation." Eliza tensed. "Will that be a problem?" "Nash being a deputy." "My son became a deputy to protect people, not to enforce the whims of men like Emmett Warren," Martha said firmly. "The badge doesn't mean he's blind to injustice, especially when it comes to children." A weight Eliza hadn't realized she was carrying seemed to lift slightly from her shoulders. "I don't want to bring trouble to your home." Martha's laugh was soft but determined. "Trouble finds its way to everyone's door sooner or later, child. What matters is how we face it when it comes." She gestured toward another bedroom across the hall. "You should rest while you can. Morning will be here before you know it." "Sleep," claimed Eliza almost as soon as her head touched the pillow. A deep, dreamless rest born of utter exhaustion. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through lace curtains, and the smell of coffee and bacon filled the air. For a moment, disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings, panic seized her. Then memory returned. The storm. Nash finding them in the trough, the kindness of Martha Sutherland. Eliza dressed quickly in the borrowed clothes, running fingers through her copper hair in a futile attempt to tame it. She found Jamie already at the kitchen table, looking remarkably recovered, solemnly sharing bits of his breakfast with Chester, who sat with surprising decorum on a stool beside him. "Miss Eliza!" the boy exclaimed, his face lighting up. "Mrs. Martha made pancakes with honey, and Chester got some too." "I see that," Eliza smiled, relief washing through her at the sight of color in the child's cheeks. "Did you thank Mrs. Martha?" Jamie nodded vigorously. "Yes'm. And Mr. Nash showed me his horse. He has a real star on his head, just like in my dream." Martha turned from the stove with a warm smile. "Good morning, dear. You look much better with some rest. Come, sit and eat while it's hot." The normalcy of the scene, the cheerful kitchen, Martha's motherly bustling, Jamie's childish chatter, created an illusion of safety so profound that Eliza found herself blinking back tears as she accepted a cup of strong, sweet coffee. "Nash had to ride out early," Martha explained, setting a plate piled with pancakes before Eliza. "There was trouble at the Hendersons' place. Nothing serious, but they needed the deputy." She sat down across from Eliza, her kind eyes serious. Before he left, he sent telegrams to some contacts in neighboring counties. Discreetly, of course. Eliza set her coffee down carefully. "What kind of contacts?" "People who might know something about the Warrens that could help your situation," Martha said. "Nash doesn't believe running is a long-term solution, not with a child involved." Fear and hope warred in Eliza's chest. "Mrs. Sutherland, Martha, you don't understand. Judge Warren practically owns Thornton County. His brother is a state senator. People who cross them tend to regret it." Martha's weathered hand covered Eliza's. "I understand more than you might think, dear. My late husband stood against powerful men in his time. It cost him, yes, but he never regretted choosing what was right over what was easy." Her eyes crinkled at the corners. "Nash is cut from the same cloth." "Mr. Nash is a hero," Jamie piped up, his mouth sticky with honey. "Like in my storybook." "Is that so?" Martha smiled at the boy. "And what makes someone a hero in your storybook, Jamie?" Jamie considered this with the grave seriousness only a 4-year-old could muster. "They protect people. And they're brave even when they're scared." He nodded decisively. "And they have horses." Eliza couldn't help but laugh, the sound surprising her with its freedom. "I see. Well, Mr. Nash certainly has a horse, so he's off to a good start. Speaking of starts, Martha said, rising to refill Eliza's coffee. What are your plans, dear? Nash said you're welcome to stay as long as you need, but I suspect you're the type who likes to have a direction in mind. The question sobered Eliza immediately. I've been thinking we might try for Colorado. I have a distant cousin in Denver who might help us get established. She hesitated, though I've nearly run through what little money I had saved. Martha nodded thoughtfully. Denver's a fine city, from what I hear. Growing fast, lots of opportunities. She glanced at Jamie, who was now solemnly explaining something to Chester. But winter's coming on, and mountain passes can be treacherous. She paused. Silverleaf could use another pair of hands, you know. Especially with Rebecca married and living in Austin now. Eliza stared at her, taken aback by the unexpected offer. You'd hire me? After knowing me less than a day? I'm a fair judge of character, Martha said simply. And that boy needs stability, not more running. Her eyes twinkled. Besides, Chester seems to have made himself quite at home in our henhouse. The chickens are scandalized, but they'll adjust. Before Eliza could respond, hoofbeats sounded outside, approaching at a rapid pace. Martha moved to the window, her expression changing from welcome to wariness in an instant. That's not Nash, she said quietly. Take Jamie to the back bedroom. Quickly now. Heart pounding. Eliza gathered Jamie into her arms, Chester waddling frantically behind them as they retreated down the hallway. Through the window at the end of the corridor, she caught a glimpse of 3 riders dismounting in the yard, and felt her blood freeze at the sight of Emmett Warren's distinctive pearl-handled revolvers gleaming at his hips. He's found us, she whispered, clutching Jamie tighter as the boy began to tremble. How did he find us so quickly? Martha appeared beside them, her face set in determined lines. The storm would have forced them to shelter nearby last night. They must have started searching the outlying properties at first light. She pressed a small key into Eliza's hand. The root cellar. Through the pantry, behind the flour barrels. This unlocks it. Go now, while I delay them. Martha, I can't let you face them alone. You can and you will, the older woman said firmly. For Jamie's sake, now go. A heavy knock rattled the front door as Eliza slipped into the pantry, guiding Jamie and Chester into the cramped space behind the barrels. The key turned smoothly in the old lock, revealing stone steps descending into cool darkness. I'm scared, Jamie whispered, clinging to Eliza's skirts. I know, sweetheart, Eliza murmured, lifting him into her arms. But remember what you said about heroes? Sometimes they're brave, even when they're scared. That's what we need to be right now. The root cellar was larger than she expected, lined with shelves of preserved fruits and vegetables. A small window near the ceiling let in just enough light to see by. Eliza settled Jamie on an old crate, Chester nestling protectively in his lap, and pressed her ear to the door, straining to hear what was happening above. Martha's voice carried clearly, polite but cool. Good morning, gentlemen. What brings the Warren party to Silverleaf so early? Mrs. Sutherland. Emmett's voice was smooth as silk and twice as cold. We're searching for a fugitive, a woman traveling with a child, and, oddly enough, a duck. They're wanted for theft and kidnapping. How unusual, Martha replied, her tone revealing nothing. I can't say I've seen such a curious trio, though I rarely venture beyond my garden these days. Mind if we look around? A second voice gruffer. One of Emmett's hired men, Eliza guessed. I'm afraid I do mind, Martha said firmly. My son, the deputy, is expected back any minute, and he's quite particular about proper procedure. Do you have a warrant, Mr. Warren? A tense silence followed. I don't need a warrant, Emmett finally said, his voice hardening. The woman stole property belonging to my family, including the child. Interesting, Martha replied. I was under the impression that children couldn't be considered property in the state of Texas. Perhaps the law has changed since my husband's time as a judge. Eliza's breath caught. Martha's husband had been a judge? She hadn't mentioned that. Mrs. Sutherland, Emmett's voice took on a dangerous edge. I respect your position in this community, but I will not be obstructed in recovering what is mine. The woman is unbalanced, potentially dangerous, The boy is my family's legal ward. Now, are you going to step aside, or am I going to have to insist? You're on Sutherland property, Mr. Warren, Martha said, her voice unwavering. And in the absence of my son, I'll thank you to respect my wishes and come back with proper documentation. Heavy footsteps crossed the wooden floor. Moving closer, Eliza realized with growing terror. "Boss," a new voice cut in. "Riders coming. Looks like the deputy and some others." Emmett cursed softly. "We'll continue this discussion later, Mrs. Sutherland, with your son present, since you insist on formalities." "I look forward to it," Martha replied calmly. "Good day, gentlemen." The front door closed, and Eliza counted the seconds, hardly daring to breathe until she heard horses galloping away. Still, she waited, keeping Jamie close, until footsteps approached the root cellar door and Martha's voice called down. "They're gone for now. You can come up." Emerging into the kitchen, Eliza found Martha calmly pouring coffee as if confronting armed men was a regular occurrence. Through the window, Eliza could see Nash dismounting from his horse, accompanied by two other men she didn't recognize. "Your husband was a judge?" Eliza asked, still processing what she'd overheard. Martha smiled faintly. "For 30 years. Judge Thomas Sutherland. He and Judge Warren were contemporaries, and frequent adversaries in matters of law and community." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "I may have neglected to mention that when Nash brought you in last night. Didn't seem relevant at the time." Before Eliza could respond, the kitchen door opened and Nash entered, removing his hat. His eyes immediately found Eliza's, relief evident in his expression. "Emmett Warren was here," he said. "Not a question." Martha nodded. "Left just before you arrived. Quite put out that I wouldn't let him search the property without a warrant." She turned to the stove. "Coffee's hot if your friends would like some." Nash gestured, and two men entered behind him, one elderly with spectacles perched on his nose, the other middle-aged with the weathered look of a rancher. "Miss Morgan," Nash said formally, "this is Mr. Abernathy, county clerk, and Mr. Dawson, who owns the neighboring ranch. They've come to help us with your situation." "Help us?" Eliza echoed, instinctively drawing Jamie closer. Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat. "Young woman, I've been clerk of records for Thornton County for 43 years. In that time, I've seen the Warren family bend the law to their purposes more times than I care to count." He adjusted his spectacles. "But document falsification is a serious matter, one that even Judge Warren may find difficult to excuse." "I don't understand," Eliza said, looking between the three men. Nash stepped forward. "Mr. Abernathy has discovered some irregularities in Jamie's guardianship papers. It seems that certain signatures may have been forged, certain dates altered. And that's not all," Mr. Dawson added, his voice gruff but kind. "My daughter worked as a maid at the Warren estate before you arrived, Miss Morgan. She witnessed incidents involving Emmett Warren that support your account of his character and conduct." Hope, fragile but persistent, bloomed in Eliza's chest. "Are you saying there might be a legal way to keep Jamie safe from them?" Nash's blue eyes met hers steadily. "I'm saying we might have enough to challenge the Warrens directly, especially if we can get this before a different judge." He paused. "But it won't be easy, and it won't be without risk." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Martha observed, setting coffee cups before their visitors. Jamie, who had been quietly observing the adults with wide eyes, suddenly spoke up. "Are you going to be my new papa, Mr. Nash?" An awkward silence fell over the kitchen, broken only by Chester's soft quacking. Nash's ears reddened slightly as he knelt to the boy's level. "No, Jamie, but I am going to help Miss Eliza keep you safe. Is that all right?" Jamie considered this seriously, then nodded. "And Chester too?" Nash's mouth quirked in a smile. "Yes, and Chester too." As the men discussed a strategy around Martha's kitchen table, Eliza found herself watching Nash. The thoughtful way he listened to others, the careful consideration he gave each suggestion, the gentle respect with which he included her in every decision. This man, who had found her asleep in a water trough with a crying boy and a duck, had somehow become their champion overnight. "Why are you doing this?" she asked him quietly when the others stepped outside to examine some documents in better light. "Taking on the Warrens is no small thing. You're risking your position, your reputation." Nash's gaze was steady, unflinching. "Some things matter more than positions or reputations, Miss Morgan." "Eliza," she corrected softly. "After all this, I think you can call me Eliza." Something warm flickered in his eyes. "Eliza, then." He hesitated, then continued. "When I found you in that trough last night, something my father used to say came back to me. He said that the true measure of a society isn't in how it treats its most powerful members, but in how it protects its most vulnerable." He glanced at Jamie, who was solemnly showing Chester a picture book Martha had unearthed from some forgotten trunk. "That boy deserves better than what the Warrens offered him, and you deserve better than being punished for protecting him." The simplicity of his conviction, the clarity of his moral compass, left Eliza momentarily speechless. In a world where men like Emmett Warren wielded power with casual cruelty, Nash Sutherland's quiet integrity shone like a beacon. "When Jamie said he dreamed of you," she said finally, "of a man with a star on his horse who would help us, I didn't believe in such things." Nash's smile was gentle. "And now?" Eliza looked around the warm kitchen, at Martha humming as she prepared lunch, at Jamie giggling as Chester investigated the colorful book illustrations, at the men outside working to build a case that might free them from the Warrens' grip. For the first time in years, she felt the stirring of something that might be hope. "Now," she said softly, "I'm beginning to wonder if dreams sometimes know better than we do where safety lies." The days at Silverleaf Ranch fell into a rhythm that Eliza hadn't experienced since before her parents died. Each morning, she woke to the sound of Martha humming in the kitchen, the scent of coffee and biscuits filling the air. Jamie's laughter as he helped Nash with morning chores drifted through the open windows, punctuated by Chester's authoritative quacking as the ducks supervised their efforts with surprising dignity. 2 weeks had passed since that stormy night when Nash had found them in the water trough. 2 weeks of safety, of planning, of building a case against the Warrens that might stand in court. 2 weeks of watching Jamie flourish under Martha's gentle care and Nash's patient attention. "He's a different child," Eliza observed one evening as she and Martha shelled peas on the back porch. Inside, Nash was teaching Jamie to play checkers. The boy's face scrunched in concentration as he contemplated his next move. "Children heal quickly when they feel safe," Martha replied, her weathered hands moving steadily through the pile of pods. "You've done well by him, Eliza. Taking him from that house was the right thing, no matter what the law might say." Eliza sighed, watching the sunset paint the horizon in shades of amber and gold. "The law seems to be whatever the Warrens say it is in Thornton County." "Laws are made by men, dear, and men can be flawed." Martha's voice held the wisdom of decades. "That's why we have conscience, to guide us when laws fail." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the rhythmic snapping of pea pods and the distant lowing of cattle being brought in for the night. In these quiet moments, Eliza could almost forget the danger that still loomed. Almost. "Emmett Warren was in town again yesterday," Martha said finally, her tone deliberately casual. "Nash saw him at the telegraph office, sending wires to neighboring counties offering rewards for information." Eliza's hands stilled. "We can't stay here much longer, can we? We're putting you and Nash at risk." Martha's eyes, when they met Eliza's, were fierce despite her gentle smile. "This is Sutherland land, child. We've stood against bullies and tyrants before." She patted Eliza's hand. "Besides, Mr. Abernathy has uncovered some very interesting information about Jamie's guardianship papers. The hearing is set for next week in Willow Creek. Judge Patterson will preside." "Patterson?" The name was unfamiliar to Eliza. "An old colleague of my husband's. They didn't always agree on matters of law. But Samuel Patterson is a fair man. He won't be swayed by the Warren name or intimidated by their connections." Martha's smile turned sly. "And he's always detested Emmett. Something about catching him cheating at cards years ago." Hope, that fragile bird that had begun to nest in Eliza's heart, fluttered its wings. Do you really think we have a chance? Before Martha could answer, the back door swung open and Nash emerged, Jamie riding on his shoulders like a conquering hero. "This young man," Nash announced gravely, "has just defeated me at checkers 3 times in a row. I suspect cheating but can't prove it." "Did not cheat," Jamie protested, giggling as Nash swung him down to the porch floor. "I just did the jump-over thing you showed me." "Ah, so you're using my own tactics against me." Nash ruffled the boy's hair affectionately. "That's just underhanded, son." The casual endearment, son, slipped out so naturally that Eliza wasn't sure Nash even realized he'd said it. But she noticed, and something warm unfurled in her chest at the sight of Jamie beaming up at the tall cowboy as if he'd hung the moon. "Chester helped," Jamie informed them solemnly. "He quacked when I should move." "Conspiring with waterfowl," Nash shook his head in mock dismay. "Is there no honor left in this world?" Martha chuckled, rising with her basket of shelled peas. "I believe that's my cue to start supper. Jamie, would you like to help me set the table?" As the boys scampered after Martha, Nash settled onto the porch step beside Eliza, his presence solid and reassuring in the gathering twilight. "How was town?" she asked, searching his face for signs of worry. "Quiet," he replied, stretching his long legs before him. "Too quiet, maybe. Word's getting around about the hearing next week. People are choosing sides." Eliza's stomach tightened. "And which side are they choosing?" Nash's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "More than you'd think are quietly hoping to see the Warrens taken down a notch. They've made plenty of enemies over the years." His expression sobered. "But they've made more friends, or at least people who fear crossing them." "I'm sorry to have brought this trouble to your door," Eliza said softly, voicing the guilt that had plagued her since that first night. Nash turned to look at her directly, his blue eyes intent in the fading light. "Don't be. Some troubles are worth having." Something in his gaze made Eliza's heart skip, and she looked away quickly, flustered by the warmth spreading across her cheeks. "Martha mentioned Judge Patterson will hear our case." "Sam Patterson is a good man," Nash confirmed, mercifully allowing the change of subject. "He and my father served together during the war, before either of them became judges. He won't be intimidated by Judge Warren or his state senator brother. That's something, at least." Eliza watched as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "I've been thinking about what happens after. If we win, if we lose. Either way, Jamie and I can't impose on your family's hospitality forever." Nash was quiet for a long moment. "Have you been unhappy here?" "No." The word burst from her with surprising force. "No, it's been the closest thing to home I've known in a very long time." "Then why are you so quick to plan your departure?" Eliza twisted her hands in her lap. "Because I've learned that good things don't last. Especially for people like me." "People like you?" Nash repeated thoughtfully. "You mean people with courage enough to rescue a child from cruelty? People who care for a boy not their own, as if he were their heart's blood? People who somehow manage to inspire the loyalty of the most dignified duck I've ever encountered?" Despite herself, Eliza smiled. "Chester is rather dignified, isn't he?" "Downright regal," Nash agreed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Eliza, I'm not going to tell you that you have to stay at Silverleaf, but I am going to ask you not to decide your future out of fear." The simple wisdom of his words settled over her like a warm blanket. Nash Sutherland had a way of cutting through confusion to the heart of things that both comforted and unsettled her. "I'll try," she promised softly. Inside, Jamie's laughter rang out, followed by Chester's indignant quacking, some domestic drama unfolding in the warm kitchen. The sound wrapped around Eliza's heart like a promise, a glimpse of what life could be if they were truly free of the Warrens' shadow. Nash stood, offering his hand to help her up. His palm was warm and calloused against hers, the grip gentle but secure. "Come on," he said. "Ma's made her famous chicken and dumplings, and if we don't get in there, Jamie and that duck will have eaten our share." As they walked together toward the golden light spilling from the kitchen windows, Eliza allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, that this was her life. This ranch, this family, this quiet man whose strength came not from the badge he wore but inappropriate behavior toward the household staff. 3 former employees of the Warren estate spoke of witnessing concerning interactions between Emmett and the child. Throughout it all, Jamie remained quiet, his small hand clutching Eliza's, occasionally reaching down to pat the basket where Chester waited with uncharacteristic patience. When Eliza's turn came to speak, she rose on shaky legs, bolstered by Nash's encouraging nod. "Miss Morgan," Judge Patterson said kindly, "please tell the court your relationship to the child and the circumstances that led you to remove him from the Warren household." Taking a deep breath, Eliza recounted her 2 years as housekeeper at the Warren estate, her growing concern for Jamie's welfare, and finally, the night she discovered Emmett in the boy's room. "He was hurting him, Your Honor," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. "Not for the first time, but I swore it would be the last. Jamie had no one else to protect him, no one who would stand against the Warrens. So I did what I believed was right, even knowing it was against the law." Judge Warren surged to his feet. "This is preposterous. This woman is a thief and a liar. She stole valuable items from our home when she fled with the boy." "The only thing I took from your house, Judge Warren," Eliza said clearly, "was a frightened child who deserved better than what your family offered him." "Your Honor," Nash spoke up, his deputy's badge catching the light as he stood. "I'd like to call one more witness if I may." Judge Patterson nodded. "Proceed, Deputy Sutherland." To everyone's surprise, Nash turned and knelt before Jamie. "Jamie, would you be brave enough to tell the judge what happened that night? The night Miss Eliza took you away from the big house?" A hush fell over the courtroom. Even Judge Patterson leaned forward, his expression softening as he regarded the small boy. "Jamie," the judge said gently, "you don't have to speak if you don't want to, but if you do, I promise to listen very carefully to what you say." Jamie looked up at Eliza, who nodded encouragingly despite the fear squeezing her heart. Asking a 4-year-old to testify in such a setting seemed an impossible burden, but Jamie had surprised her many times with his resilience. "Mr. Emmett hurt me," Jamie said, his voice small but clear in the silent courtroom. "He said I ruined his book, but I didn't touch it. He said nobody would believe me, 'cause I'm just a stupid orphan." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Judge Warren's face had gone ashen, while Emmett's was flushed with anger. "He hurt my arm real bad," Jamie continued, gaining confidence. "Miss Eliza came in and made him stop. She was real brave." He looked up at Eliza with absolute trust. "Then she said we had to go away so he couldn't hurt me no more. And Chester came too." "Chester?" Judge Patterson inquired, eyebrows raised. As if on cue, an indignant quack emanated from the basket at Martha's feet. A ripple of surprised laughter swept through the courtroom. "My duck," Jamie explained seriously. "He protects me too." Judge Patterson's lips twitched. "I see. Thank you, Jamie. You've been very brave today." The judge sat back, studying the Warren contingent with narrowed eyes. "I've heard enough. This court will take a brief recess while I consider my ruling." As Judge Patterson left the bench, the courtroom erupted in speculative murmurs. Nash moved to sit beside Eliza, his presence solid and reassuring. "You did well," he said softly. "Both of you. Do you think it will be enough?" Eliza couldn't keep the anxiety from her voice. Nash's eyes were steady on hers. "I think the truth has a power all its own, especially when it comes from the mouth of a child." The recess lasted barely 20 minutes before Judge Patterson returned, his expression grave as he called the court back to order. "In the matter of the guardianship of James Edward Thornton," he began, "this court finds significant evidence of impropriety in the original guardianship arrangement. The documentation presented shows clear signs of tampering, and the testimony regarding the child's treatment in the Warren household is deeply troubling." Judge Warren's face had gone from ashen to crimson. "Your Honor, I must protest." "You must be silent, Harold," Judge Patterson cut in sharply, "or I'll have you removed from my courtroom." He turned his attention back to his written decision. "Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that the guardianship previously granted to Harold and Elizabeth Warren is hereby revoked." A collective gasp went up from the gallery. Eliza's hand flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes as Jamie bounced excitedly on Martha's lap. Furthermore, the judge continued, given the concerning nature of the testimony regarding Emmett Warren's conduct, I am referring this matter to the county prosecutor for further investigation. Emmett leapt to his feet. This is outrageous. You can't. I can and I have, Mr. Warren, Judge Patterson interrupted coldly. And I suggest you consider your next words very carefully, as they may well be used in subsequent proceedings. Emmett subsided, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. As to the matter of James Edward Thornton's future guardianship, the judge continued, given the clear bond between the child and Miss Eliza Morgan, and her demonstrated commitment to his welfare even at significant personal risk, this court grants temporary guardianship to Miss Morgan for a period of 6 months. Eliza's heart soared, even as she registered the word temporary with a pang of uncertainty. During this period, Judge Patterson explained, Miss Morgan will be required to demonstrate stable housing, income, and continued appropriate care for the child. At the end of 6 months, the court will review the arrangement and consider permanent guardianship. He looked directly at Eliza. Is this arrangement acceptable to you, Miss Morgan? Yes, Your Honor, Eliza managed, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you. Judge Patterson nodded, then glanced at the basket from which occasional quacks had emanated throughout the proceedings. And I trust Chester the duck will continue his apparently effective protective duties. A ripple of laughter broke the tension in the courtroom. Even Nash chuckled, his hand finding Eliza's and squeezing gently. This court is adjourned, Judge Patterson declared, bringing down his gavel with finality. The courtroom erupted in conversation as people rose, some moving to congratulate Eliza, others clustering around the furious Warren contingent. Through the crowd, Eliza saw Judge Warren grasp his son's arm, speaking urgently into his ear. The look Emmett cast in their direction made her blood run cold despite their victory. This isn't over, she murmured to Nash. No, he agreed quietly. But it's a beginning. Outside the courthouse, autumn sunlight bathed the town in golden light. Jamie skipped ahead with Martha, Chester now waddling importantly at his side, freed from the confinement of the basket. Several townspeople stopped to congratulate them, offering handshakes and encouraging words that suggested not everyone had been cowed by the Warren family's influence. 6 months, Eliza said thoughtfully as they walked toward the wagon. To prove I can provide a stable home for Jamie. Nash glanced down at her, something unreadable in his blue eyes. You're thinking about Denver again. Your cousin? It would be a fresh start, she said, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Away from the Warrens' influence. Nash stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Around them, the bustle of Willow Creek continued. Horses and wagons, shoppers and merchants, life moving forward in its ordinary rhythms, despite the extraordinary changes this day had wrought in Eliza's world. Silverleaf has a schoolhouse that's been sitting empty since Miss Henderson married last spring, Nash said quietly. The children are being taught in the church for now, but it's not ideal. The town council's been looking for a teacher. Eliza's heart quickened. A teacher? Someone good with children. Someone with patience and kindness. His eyes held her steadily. Someone like you, Eliza. I've never taught before, she stammered, caught off guard by the suggestion. You've been teaching Jamie his letters and numbers. Martha says he's learning faster than any child she's known. Nash's smile was gentle. And the position comes with the schoolhouse cottage. Small, but sturdy. Room enough for a woman, a boy, and a duck with delusions of grandeur. The possibility unfurled before her like a map to a future she hadn't dared imagine. Independence, purpose, a home of their own yet still close to the Sutherlands, to Nash. You're serious, she breathed. The council would be lucky to have you, Nash said simply. And Silverleaf would be poorer for your leaving. The words he didn't say hung between them, as tangible as the autumn sunlight that gilded his features. Words about what he would feel if she left, about the connection that had grown between them these past weeks. I'll consider it, Eliza promised, her voice softer than she intended. Truly. Nash nodded, seemingly satisfied with that commitment for now. They resumed walking toward the wagon where Martha and Jamie waited, the boy chattering excitedly about their victory, about the future, about all the possibilities that stretched before them. As Nash helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary, Eliza realized that for the first time in years, she was looking forward to tomorrow, and all the tomorrows that might follow, with hope instead of fear. The girl who had been found asleep in a water trough with a crying boy and a duck was beginning to believe in dreams again. The schoolhouse bell rang out across Silverleaf, its clear tone carrying on the crisp November air. Children poured from the white clapboard building, their laughter and chatter creating a joyful symphony as they scattered toward waiting parents or headed home in laughing groups. Eliza stood in the doorway, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the autumn chill, watching as the last of her students disappeared down the dusty road. 2 months had passed since the hearing in Willow Creek. 2 months of building a new life in the schoolhouse cottage, of teaching not just Jamie but 23 other children, ranging from 5 to 15 years old. 2 months of gradually letting yourself believe that this life could be real, could be permanent. "Miss Morgan!" a voice called from across the schoolyard. Eliza turned to see Helen Dawson, the rancher's wife, approaching with a covered basket. "I brought some of those apple turnovers Jamie's so fond of, though I suspect my motives aren't entirely altruistic. I'm hoping you'll share your thoughts on Peter's reading." Eliza smiled, ushering the woman inside where the iron stove still radiated welcome heat. "Peter's making wonderful progress. He's been staying after lessons for extra practice 3 days a week." Mrs. Dawson's face brightened as she set the basket on Eliza's desk. "Has he really?" "He didn't mention that." "I think he wanted to surprise you," Eliza explained, gathering papers into neat stacks. "He told me he wants to read you a whole chapter of that adventure book for Christmas." Tears sprang to the older woman's eyes. "That boy! We thought he'd never learn. The last teacher said he was hopeless, just not meant for books." Eliza's expression hardened momentarily. "No child is hopeless, Mrs. Dawson. Some just need a different approach." She softened, thinking of Peter's determination, his frustration that had gradually transformed into pride as the letters began making sense to him. "Your son has a fine mind. He just needed someone to believe that." As Mrs. Dawson departed with renewed hope for her son's education, Eliza felt the familiar warmth of purpose that had become her daily companion. The transformation from housekeeper to teacher hadn't been without challenges. There were nights she stayed up until dawn preparing lessons, days when maintaining order among 24 energetic children seemed an impossible feat. But the rewards. Watching young minds discover the magic of stories, seeing confidence bloom where uncertainty had taken root, those moments made every struggle worthwhile. "Waiting for someone?" The deep voice from the doorway made Eliza turn, a smile already forming at the familiar sound. Nash leaned against the frame, hat in hand, blue eyes crinkling at the corners in that way that still made her heart skip. "Just finishing up," she replied, gathering her things. "Jamie's at your mother's for the afternoon. She's teaching him to make pumpkin bread for Thanksgiving." "And Chester?" Nash inquired, straight-faced, but with that telltale twinkle in his eye. "Supervising, of course. Where else would he be?" They shared a laugh, both picturing the duck's dignified presence in Martha's kitchen, where he had become an accepted, if unusual, part of daily life at Silverleaf. Nash offered his arm as they stepped out into the schoolyard. It was a small gesture, proper, and unremarkable to any observer, yet Eliza treasured these moments when propriety allowed them to bridge the careful distance they maintained in public. Their relationship had evolved with gradual, deliberate care over the past months. Nash respected the precariousness of her position. A single woman, a provisional guardian, a new teacher still establishing her reputation in the community. His courtship, if that's what it was, had been conducted with such subtlety that Eliza sometimes wondered if she was imagining the deeper currents beneath their friendship. But there were moments. A lingering glance across Martha's dinner table, his hand steadying her elbow as she stepped down from the church porch. Quiet conversations on the schoolhouse steps after he'd walked her home that told her she wasn't alone in feeling this connection that defied simple definition. "I spoke with Judge Patterson this morning," Nash said as they walked toward the schoolhouse cottage, a cozy structure set back from the main building among a stand of cottonwoods. "He's coming to Silverleaf next week for your guardianship review. Eliza's step faltered slightly. Though she'd known this day was approaching, the 6-month review that would determine whether her guardianship of Jamie would become permanent, the reality of it sent a flutter of anxiety through her chest. So soon? It hasn't quite been… He's doing it early, Nash explained, his voice gentle, as a favor to me. I thought, well, with Thanksgiving coming, it seemed right to have everything settled before the holiday. Eliza glanced up at him, touched by his thoughtfulness. Thank you, she said softly. What did he say about our chances? Nash's smile was reassuring. He didn't say much. Judges rarely do. But he did mention he's received 17 letters from Silverleaf residents, singing your praises as both teacher and guardian. 17? Eliza gasped, astonished. Who would? Everyone, Nash said simply. The Dawsons, the Hendersons, Reverend Clark, Dr. Miller, most of the town council. Even old Mr. Finch, who complains about everything on principle, wrote that his granddaughter couldn't stop talking about Miss Morgan's wonderful history lessons. Tears pricked at Eliza's eyes, unexpected emotion welling up at this evidence of how fully she and Jamie had been embraced by the community. After years of feeling adrift, of being just another invisible servant in a wealthy household, the recognition of her value, not just as a caretaker for Jamie, but as a teacher, as a person who contributed something meaningful, was overwhelming. I didn't know, she whispered, blinking rapidly. Nash's voice was warm with understanding. That's because you've been too busy changing lives to notice how much your own has changed. They had reached the cottage, its small porch adorned with pumpkins Jamie had helped grow in the garden behind the schoolhouse. Through the window, Eliza could see the evidence of their settled life. Jamie's drawings pinned to the walls, books stacked on every surface, Chester's woven basket near the hearth. Would you like to come in? She asked, the invitation simple yet significant in its casualness, a measure of how far they'd come from those first weary days. Nash shook his head reluctantly. I'd better get back to the ranch. Ma's expecting help with the new calf, and I promised Jamie I'd show him how to feed it when he's done with his baking lessons. His expression grew more serious. But there's something else I wanted to tell you. Something I thought you should hear from me rather than town gossip. The shift in his tone sent a chill through Eliza. What is it? Emmett Warren is back in the area, Nash said, confirming her worst fears. He's been staying at the Cross T Ranch just over in Thornton County, keeping his distance from Silverleaf, but close enough, Eliza finished, her throat tight. The specter of Emmett Warren had never fully disappeared from her thoughts, even as life had settled into its new, hopeful patterns. Do you think he's waiting for something? For the guardianship review? Nash's jaw tightened. I don't know. The prosecutor's investigation into his conduct has gone quiet. Judge Warren has friends in high places. But the restraining order is still in effect. He can't come within 100 yards of you or Jamie. A piece of paper won't stop a man like Emmett Warren, Eliza said softly, voicing the fear that had lingered at the edges of their new life. Nash's hand found hers, warm and steady. No, he agreed, but I will. The simple declaration, spoken without bravado or posturing, carried the weight of absolute certainty. In that moment, looking up into Nash Sutherland's steadfast blue eyes, Eliza believed him. This man, who had found her asleep in a water trough with a crying boy and a duck, who had opened his home and his heart without hesitation, would stand against any threat, no matter how powerful. I know, she whispered, squeezing his hand briefly before propriety demanded they separate. Nash cleared his throat, settling his hat back on his head. I'll come by tomorrow to escort you and Jamie to Sunday services. We'll be ready, Eliza promised, watching as he strode back toward the main road, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. Only when he had disappeared from view did she enter the cottage, closing the door firmly behind her and turning the key in the lock with deliberate care. Sunday dawned clear and cold, the first true frost of the season, silvering the grass and etching delicate patterns on the cottage windows. Jamie bounced with excitement as Eliza helped him into his Sunday best, not just for church, but for the promised visit to the new calf afterward. Do you think the calf will like me? he asked for the third time as Eliza attempted to tame his cowlick with a damp comb. "I'm sure it will," she assured him, adjusting his small tie. "Animals always do. Look at Chester. He practically adopted you on sight." As if summoned by his name, the duck waddled into the bedroom, eyeing their formal attire with what Eliza could have sworn was disapproval. "You can't come to church, Chester," Jamie informed the duck solemnly. "Miss Eliza says it's not appropriate." "Appropriate," Eliza corrected gently. "And Chester understands. He'll keep watch over the cottage while we're gone." In truth, the duck had become something of a local celebrity, occasionally accompanying Jamie to school, where he served as an unusual but effective teaching aid for natural science lessons. But even Silverleaf's tolerant congregation drew the line at waterfowl in the church pews. The knock at the door came precisely at 9, Nash's punctuality as reliable as the sunrise. Eliza opened the door to find him on the porch in his Sunday suit, hat in hand, looking so handsome it momentarily stole her breath. "Morning, Miss Morgan," he greeted her formally, though his eyes conveyed a warmer message. "Master Jamie, are you ready for services?" Jamie bounded forward. "Yes, sir. And to see the calf after?" Nash chuckled, ruffling the boy's hair and undoing all of Eliza's careful grooming in an instant. "The calf's not going anywhere, partner. It'll be waiting for you." As they walked toward the church at the center of town, Jamie skipping ahead, Eliza was struck by how natural this felt. This small family unit they had created. This rhythm of Sundays and school days and quiet evenings. It wasn't what she had imagined for herself in those dark days at the Warren estate, but it was infinitely more precious for being unexpected. The church was already filling with Silverleaf citizens when they arrived. Heads turned as they entered, but the looks were friendly, welcoming, so different from the suspicious glances that had followed her in those first uncertain weeks. Nash guided them to a pew near the front where Martha was already seated, elegant in her Sunday best. "There's my favorite baker," Martha whispered to Jamie as he settled beside her. "Mrs. Henderson tells me you've been helping Eliza with cookies for the Harvest Festival." Jamie nodded solemnly. "I'm the official taster," he declared with importance. "It's a big responsibility." The adults exchanged amused glances over his head as Reverend Clark approached the pulpit to begin the service. Eliza tried to focus on the sermon, something about finding blessings in unexpected places, but her attention kept drifting to the solid warmth of Nash beside her, to Jamie's small hand tucked trustingly in hers, to the community that surrounded them with quiet acceptance. It was only as the congregation rose for the final hymn that Eliza noticed the latecomer slipping into a pew at the very back of the church. Her breath caught, fingers tightening involuntarily around Jamie's hand as she recognized the elegant cut of Emmett Warren's suit, the arrogant tilt of his head. Nash followed her gaze, his body tensing beside her. Slowly, deliberately, he placed a protective hand at the small of her back, the gesture both reassurance and declaration. "He can't do anything here," Nash murmured, his voice barely audible beneath the swelling hymn. "Not in God's house, not with the whole town watching." Eliza nodded, though her heart raced with the unwelcome reminder that their peace remained conditional, threatened. She pulled Jamie closer to her side, angling her body to shield him from Emmett's view. The boy looked up, sensing her distress. "Miss Eliza? What's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart," she managed, forcing a smile. "Just a chill." The final notes of the hymn faded, and Reverend Clark offered the benediction. As the congregation began to disperse, Nash leaned down to whisper in Eliza's ear. "Take Jamie out the side door with Ma. I'll meet you at the ranch." Eliza wanted to protest, to insist they face this threat together, but the determined set of Nash's jaw told her this wasn't a moment for debate. She nodded, guiding Jamie toward Martha, who had already sensed the situation with a mother's intuition. "Come along, dears," Martha said brightly, though her eyes reflected Eliza's concern. "Let's get a head start on those dinner rolls while Nash finishes his church business." As they slipped out the side entrance, Eliza cast one backward glance to see Nash striding purposefully toward Emmett Warren, his deputy's badge gleaming in the sunlight that streamed through the church's stained-glass windows. The ride to Silverleaf Ranch was tense, at least for the adults. Jamie, oblivious to the undercurrents, chattered excitedly about the calf, about Chester, about the upcoming Thanksgiving feast. Martha responded with her usual warmth, though Eliza noticed the older woman's frequent glances toward the road behind them. "Nash will be fine," Martha said quietly as they turned onto the ranch's long drive. "He knows how to handle men like Emmett Warren." "It's not Nash I'm worried about," Eliza admitted. "Emmett doesn't fight fair. He never has." Martha's expression was grimly knowing. Neither does Nash when it comes to protecting those he loves. The simple statement hung in the air between them, its implications warming Eliza despite her fears. Those he loves. Was that what this was? This careful dance they'd been engaged in these past months? This tentative building of something that felt like family, like home? Before she could pursue the thought, they arrived at the ranch house. Jamie immediately scrambled down, eager to see the new calf. Martha took him by the hand, leading him toward the barn with promises of bottle feeding and perhaps even a ride on the gentle old mare if he was very good. Left alone with her thoughts, Eliza paced the front porch, straining to hear the sound of approaching hoofbeats. What was happening back in town? Had Nash confronted Emmett directly? Would there be violence? Legal repercussions? She was so lost in her worries that she almost missed the rider approaching from the east, not from the direction of town, but from the back pastures. It took her a moment to recognize Nash's distinctive posture in the saddle, his horse moving at an unhurried trot. Relief flooded through her as she hurried down the porch steps to meet him. "What happened?" she demanded, as he dismounted. "I thought you were confronting Emmett at the church." Nash's expression was unreadable as he secured his horse to the hitching post. "I did. He's gone." "Gone? Just like that?" Eliza couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. "What did you say to him?" Nash turned to face her fully, something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. A hardness, a glimpse of the steel beneath his gentle exterior. I reminded him that Silverleaf isn't Thornton County. That here, the law protects everyone equally, regardless of their name or wealth. He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of contained frustration, and I informed him that if he came near you or Jamie again, he'd regret it in ways his daddy's money couldn't fix. The cold certainty in Nash's voice sent a shiver down Eliza's spine. Not of fear, but of recognition that this man's kindness was a choice, not a weakness. And he just left? Nash's mouth quirked in a humorless smile. Let's just say he recognized I wasn't making an idle threat. He glanced toward the barn where Jamie's excited voice could be heard. Is he all right? He doesn't know Emmett was there, Eliza assured him. He's too excited about the calf. Some of the tension eased from Nash's shoulders. Good, that's good. He offered his arm. Shall we join them? I believe I promised a certain young man his first lesson in calf rearing. As they walked toward the barn, Eliza found herself studying Nash's profile, seeing him with new clarity. This man contained multitudes. The gentle teacher who showed Jamie how to plant pumpkin seeds, the stalwart deputy who upheld the law with unwavering integrity, and, yes, the protector who would face down any threat to those under his care. Do you think he'll come back? She asked quietly as they paused at the barn door. Emmett, I mean. Nash considered the question seriously. Not any time soon, family's legal ward. Now, are you going to step aside, or am I going to have to insist? You're on Sutherland property, Mr. Warren, Martha said, her voice unwavering. And in the absence of my son, I'll thank you to respect my wishes and come back with proper documentation. Heavy footsteps crossed the wooden floor. Moving closer, Eliza realized with growing terror. Boss, a new voice cut in. Riders coming. Looks like the deputy and some others. Emmett cursed softly. We'll continue this discussion later, Mrs. Sutherland, with your son present, since you insist on formalities. I look forward to it, Martha replied calmly. Good day, gentlemen. The front door closed, and Eliza counted the seconds, hardly daring to breathe until she heard horses galloping away. Still, she waited, keeping Jamie close, until footsteps approached the root cellar door and Martha's voice called down. They're gone for now. You can come up. Emerging into the kitchen, Eliza found Martha calmly pouring coffee as if confronting armed men was a regular occurrence. Through the window, Eliza could see Nash dismounting from his horse, accompanied by two other men she didn't recognize. Your husband was a judge? Eliza asked, still processing what she'd overheard. Martha smiled faintly. For 30 years. Judge Thomas Sutherland. He and Judge Warren were contemporaries, and frequent adversaries in matters of law and community. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. I may have neglected to mention that when Nash brought you in last night. Didn't seem relevant at the time. Before Eliza could respond, the kitchen door opened and Nash entered, removing his hat. His eyes immediately found Eliza's, relief evident in his expression. "Emmett Warren was here," he said. "Not a question." Martha nodded. "Left just before you arrived. Quite put out that I wouldn't let him search the property without a warrant." She turned to the stove. "Coffee's hot if your friends would like some." Nash gestured, and two men entered behind him, one elderly with spectacles perched on his nose, the other middle-aged with the weathered look of a rancher. "Miss Morgan," Nash said formally, "this is Mr. Abernathy, county clerk, and Mr. Dawson, who owns the neighboring ranch. They've come to help us with your situation." "Help us?" Eliza echoed, instinctively drawing Jamie closer. Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat. "Young woman, I've been clerk of records for Thornton County for 43 years. In that time, I've seen the Warren family bend the law to their purposes more times than I care to count." He adjusted his spectacles. "But document falsification is a serious matter, one that even Judge Warren may find difficult to excuse." "I don't understand," Eliza said, looking between the three men. Nash stepped forward. "Mr. Abernathy has discovered some irregularities in Jamie's guardianship papers. It seems that certain signatures may have been forged, certain dates altered. And that's not all," Mr. Dawson added, his voice gruff but kind. "My daughter worked as a maid at the Warren estate before you arrived, Miss Morgan. She witnessed incidents involving Emmett Warren that support your account of his character and conduct." Hope, fragile but persistent, bloomed in Eliza's chest. "Are you saying there might be a legal way to keep Jamie safe from them?" Nash's blue eyes met hers steadily. "I'm saying we might have enough to challenge the Warrens directly, especially if we can get this before a different judge." He paused. "But it won't be easy, and it won't be without risk." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Martha observed, setting coffee cups before their visitors. Jamie, who had been quietly observing the adults with wide eyes, suddenly spoke up. "Are you going to be my new papa, Mr. Nash?" An awkward silence fell over the kitchen, broken only by Chester's soft quacking. Nash's ears reddened slightly as he knelt to the boy's level. "No, Jamie, but I am going to help Miss Eliza keep you safe. Is that all right?" Jamie considered this seriously, then nodded. "And Chester too?" Nash's mouth quirked in a smile. "Yes, and Chester too." As the men discussed a strategy around Martha's kitchen table, Eliza found herself watching Nash. The thoughtful way he listened to others, the careful consideration he gave each suggestion, the gentle respect with which he included her in every decision. This man, who had found her asleep in a water trough with a crying boy and a duck, had somehow become their champion overnight. "Why are you doing this?" she asked him quietly when the others stepped outside to examine some documents in better light.